Homburg in this chapter, he talks about how essentially you have a Eastern explanation for evil and a Western explanation for evil. The
Yeah,
Eastern
yeah, that was
explanation is tied to this idea of ignorance, and then he says that the Western version is that it's like a misalignment in the will.
temptation would be impotent if it did not find a terrain already prepared in the human soul. The
Okay.
unfortunate misunderstanding locating innate humane evil in the body instead of in the soul is due to a tendency towards a materialistic interpretation of the biblical story of paradise and the fall. Indeed, if paradise is understood as a place on the terrestrial or material plane, and if the fall is similarly understood as having taken place on this plane, innate human evil cannot be understood otherwise than as biologically hereditary, i.e., that it is the flesh which bears it and transmits the seed of evil from generation to generation, then it is the flesh which is the enemy of the soul and against which one has to struggle. Hence, one disciplines it by flagellation, one weakens it by depriving it of food and sleep, and one scorns it and mistreats it in many ways. One is ashamed of one's body. However, it is the body which rightly has more reason to be ashamed of the soul inhabiting it than the latter of the body. For the body is a miracle of wisdom, harmony, and stability, which does not merit scorn, but rather the admiration of the soul.
He says not in the body. Then he's like, well, what about where he's moving on to try to locate what it is in the soul, and he presents that like two views, and
Right.
he said, and he tries to present because it's Thomberg, he tries to create a synthesis of those views.
Yes. Yeah.
And one is ignorance, and the other is a misalignment of the will. It's on page 436.
Okay.
He says, let us now to return to the problem of innate human evil. What is it? It is ahamkara, the sense of self due to advidya, primordial ignorance, caused by Maya's power of projection, associated with Maya's power of obscuration, which contains the illusory identification of the true self, Atman, with the empirical self, as clearly attested by the revelation of scripture, direct, authentic experience, tradition, and inference. This is the answer according to the ancient wisdom of India from the mouth of Shankara, the author of this summary and synthesis. It is desire engendered by ignorance, which consists in attributing the central role to an illusory mental construction of the self, whilst the center is nowhere or everywhere, answers Buddhism. So this is his description of like the left wing of which it's obviously he's drawing from Eastern sources here. And then he says the other current of tradition, the right wing entity of wisdom, if you wish, the Western Egyptian Jewish Christian current, gives another reply. According to it, innate human evil is not due to primordial ignorance, but rather the sin of knowledge at one's own instigation instead of through God. So that's like some kind of like movement of the will.